Welcome to the U.S.-China Global Education television series, presented by the Confucius Institute U.S. Center in partnership with the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. This 10-part series brings together presidents of universities and cultural institutions that host the Confucius Institute, along with distinguished American business, diplomatic, and educational leaders, to discuss the importance of global education, language development, and people-to-people exchange between the United States and China. My name is Tony Cully Foster, and I'm the President and CEO of the World Affairs Council, Washington, D.C. Our focus is on global education, international affairs, and global communications. Like the Confucius Institute U.S. Center, we build educational bridges and advance international understanding between students, teachers, and professionals in the United States, China, and worldwide. We have a valued strategic partnership with the Confucius Institute U.S. Center. Their focus is on Chinese language development, global education, and people-to-people exchanges between the United States and China. It's my honor today to be here with my friend and colleague, Professor Gao Qing, the Executive Director of the Confucius Institute U.S. Center, who will introduce our program today.
Thank you, Tony. Today's interview is being filmed at the headquarters of the United Parcel Service, also known as UPS, in Atlanta, Georgia. UPS is the world's largest logistic and supply chain management company. We are honored to be joined here today by two distinguished speakers, Mr. David Abney, the CEO and chairperson of UPS, and Dr. Mark Becker, the president of Georgia State University. Dr. Becker is the 7th president of Georgia State University, a major public research institution in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. He is a first-generation college student and has achieved great success as an academic leader and renowned scholar of biostatistics. He is personally and professionally committed to ensuring that students from all socioeconomic backgrounds receive the same educational opportunities. With this vision, Georgia State University has become the nation's leader in innovative educational programs, fostering student success. Dr. Becker has strategically positioned his faculty and students to thrive in this global landscape through the establishment of numerous international partnerships around the world, including in China. He oversaw the development of 2 Confucius Institutes during his career, the Confucius Institutes at the University of South Carolina and the Confucius Institute at Georgia State University, which seeks to serve business and educational communities in Georgia. And now, let's join Dr. Becker and Ms. David Abney for this important dialogue.
I'm here with David Abney, CEO and Chairman of UPS, the global logistics and transportation powerhouse. Dave, you're responsible today for a company with nearly 100,000 vehicles, 500 aircraft, but you started literally at the bottom of the organization, if you will, as a part-time employee loading trucks. So would you tell us about how you got that start?
I was a freshman in college, looking for a job like many others, and just thought it was a job to get me through college. But through the next few years, I really became what we call brown-blooded, and really realized this was a company I'd spend the rest of my career with. And 43 years later, here I am. But UPS just does such a great job of, I call it stair-stepping development, where you give people a little more responsibility and then you give them a little more. But then it's just been a lot of wonderful people that have taken a lot of time over the years, and then did not know the career was going to be written in this way, but it was, and I'm just very fortunate.
So as you rose through the ranks, you eventually moved to an international dimension. So tell us a little bit about your international experience with UPS.
Yes, it would have been 1999, 2000, we bought an international freight forwarder, and it was a company that I got to run as soon as we acquired it, and that was my real first exposure. I'd traveled a little bit, but this is when I go to China the first time, and I go to different parts of Asia for the first time, and eye-opening experience the first time you go.
Well, what were your impressions of China the first time?
Well, you know, it's amazing what my impressions were before I landed compared to when I landed, because I was still buying in, and you got to remember a long time ago, but buying in that everyone was going to be in gray uniforms, and it's going to be just a real gray, dark kind of environment, a little bit backwards, and I'm landing at night in Shanghai, and it looked like I was landing in Vegas. Neon lights, such a modern city, and of course it's changed tremendously even since then. But just a very impressive first view of China.
Right, and you've been to Shenzhen because UPS has a major facility in Shenzhen.
That's
Can
right.
you tell us a little bit about the decision to locate there and what you've been able to do from Shenzhen?
You know, when we first started entering China, we looked at where we needed to be, and the first hub we put was Shanghai, and that of course covers a certain part of the country, and then Shenzhen for the south, especially into Hong Kong and Guangzhou and those areas. And two completely different areas of the country, just like New York and Mississippi are completely different, right? Yeah. But very impressed with both places, but Shenzhen is just, that is an industrial capital of the world, that's for sure.
Now, up to and including today, you still go to China quite frequently, multiple times per year. So as you look back over the years, what are some of your most memorable experiences in China, whether they be cultural or business?
Right. Well, I can tell you that there's been so many. Every time I go, it's just a completely different experience. And to give you an idea is, and you've probably seen these too, a satellite picture of the first time I went to Shanghai, and then one within the last year or two, and the lighting and all the things that showed development. Just amazing, the changes that have been made.
Yeah, now it continues to change rapidly, and
that's right.
It's very exciting to see what's happening and to know what UPS is able to do in the region. Right. As you think about Mississippi, New Jersey, New York, the U.S., China, other parts of the world you've worked in, you've really gotten a lot of cross-cultural experience. How do you think that's helped you develop as a leader, working across cultures?
I'm telling you, Mark, all the difference in the world. You got to remember that I grew up in Mississippi in the 1960s. So there wasn't a lot of cross-cultural experiences back then. And then I joined UPS, and I never would have imagined the experiences I would have gotten since then. And what you find out is the more you know about other areas, the more that you understand. So it's easier to see friends versus people that you're concerned about. And you also find out that the American way is not the only way to do things. And you learn so much about people from all over the world that it just helps you when you travel anywhere in the world if you know how to adapt and adjust.
Yeah, it's been my experience, even though we all come from different cultures, that we all have the basic same wants and needs out of life. And so it's actually not difficult to communicate across cultures once you understand, where people are coming from. It's a little bit different, their background and experiences. And so when you build your team in Shenzhen, for example, is it difficult for UPS to go into a place like China and develop a workforce, develop a talent pool?
You know, because of our worldwide brand, it makes it a little easier than most. I'm not going to say it's simple,
It's not trivial.
Nothing, yeah. But one of the things that helped us a lot is we decided to be a sponsor for logistics for the Beijing Olympics. And so we were able to make a lot of contacts, and we were able to increase our brand value. And many people in China are looking for these multinational companies to give them the experiences that they need to get to see the world just like we want to. And so it has not been difficult. What is challenging is once you get the right people, is you got to make sure you do other things to develop and to treat them right, to keep them, because so many multinationals are coming in they'd love to hire experienced UPS trained employees. Yeah.
So as we think about UPS, this organization you're responsible for, can you just sort of give us a history and an overview of how UPS first entered China and what the development has been since then?
I will, because I was involved in a lot. Not when we first entered, we entered through a joint venture with Sinotrans, which about every other integrator did the same thing back in the 80s. And then in the late 90s and early 2000s, we decided to buy out our joint venture. And so we became the first multinational integrator, which is the way we refer to ourselves, that owned our own operation in China. And that was a big moment, and we flew our brown tails, that's what we call our UPS aircraft,
Sure.
into the city, a couple of cities for the first time. And since then, we have supplemented that ownership with a joint venture now with SF Express, which is a leading Chinese local package delivery company. And so we tie in their expertise with our global network, and it's going to make us even stronger. So we're absolutely excited about China.
Now, is that a general strategy you have worldwide, or is that specific to China, where you have a local sort of at the street level provider and you have your global network?
You know, it's I wouldn't say it's unique just to China, but it is unique way for us to do business in countries that you just need that local cooperation and that local expertise. So in other places, like in Germany, we would do a completely different model, wholly owned, all UPS, similar to in the U.S. In China, as many companies and schools, I'm sure, have found out that the more partners, high quality partners that you can hook up with, the better off you are.
Now, does UPS move its employees around the world? So would your Shenzhen operation, for example, have Americans who have rotated in and out, sort of like Coca-Cola does so frequently, or do you rely much more on local talent?
Yeah, we rely much more on local. We will supplement local talent with expats. We call them from the U.S. And the reason for doing that is to give key UPS leaders that we think are going to have a bright future, to give them those experiences. What we do not want to have to do is rely on expats in the long term to run our different countries, because we've got 440,000 employees worldwide. We need management and leadership from those countries, managing people from those countries, because they understand their cultures as much as you and I understand the U.S.
Right. As you look to the future, what do you see as UPS's future in Asia and in China in particular?
Well, this is a growth engine for us. There's no doubt about it. This middle class that in China is over 350 million. And again, you know this, but it's more than the entire population of the United States. That is opportunity. And what makes it even more of an opportunity is they want more and more of the lifestyle that they see from the Western world. And so China, just 10 years ago, was much more of an export market into the U.S. and Europe and others. Now, because they have the largest e-commerce market in the world, it is much more of a destination, and there is plenty of growth in China.
So UPS is well known here in Atlanta, at least, for its culture. I mean, it's a company where people like yourself started loading trucks and rise to the senior executive ranks. You know, you've obviously risen to the highest level possible, but there are, you know, just for generations, that has been the UPS culture. So what is it about the culture that is the company really intentional about certain elements of its culture and developing its talent?
Absolutely. And the first is we are looking for team players. Now, we still want superstar talent, but we want superstar talent that's focused on how the team can win the game, not on how they individually can do. So not everyone fits into that mode. But you learn pretty quick at UPS that you either focus on the team or you probably need to go somewhere else. Because when you have a worldwide network, everybody has got to just work in sync with each other. And so we talk a lot about that a lot. We talk a lot about honesty and integrity because we're going to customers' houses and stuff. And we talk about safety. We've got one of the largest fleets, so of course we have
With nearly 100,000 vehicles, you've got a lot of risk.
You better be, and you better be focused on safety, and we certainly are.
Right.
But another one, and it's in the U.S., but it's really throughout the world, is this diversity and inclusion.
Right.
We have just found, and it applies in China too, that the more diverse thought that you get, and the people from different walks of life, it just adds to the puzzle. I mean, it would, if you did not have diversity and inclusion, it'd be like trying to play a baseball game with all right fielders. It would make no sense. But then if you add all the other positions, and that's the way as a company that we look at it.
So as a company, we know you value education a lot, and certainly Georgia State and UPS have been great partners for a long time. But
Right.
what is the general approach that the company takes to promoting educational opportunities for its employees, for its workforce?
But you know, if you're going to promote from within like we do, then you better be very focused on education, right? Because David Abney nor any of our other senior leaders, when they first started the company, were ready for these type of jobs. So we have a lot of partnerships, and Georgia State's one we're very proud of here. It's how you and I met many years ago. But we, from our foundation standpoint, we support over 6,500 different educational programs throughout the world. And then we do a lot of internal programs with our leadership team and with partner universities to where it's just continuous education. And we will do that. That's one of the keys to our success.
You know, the question I get frequently from our generation is, so these students today, they're, you know, are they really as bad as I think they are? You know, they can't do what we could do. And I say, well, they've grown up in a different world, and there are things that we could do because of the way we were educated that they can't do. The other hand is there are things they can do that we never would have even imagined could be done. You know, you think about the way they use technology, the way they work in groups and teams, and you know, think about, you know, when we went to school, you memorized and you, in a sense, regurgitated. You fed information back.
That's right.
The students today, they're experiential. They want to do. They want to get in and do, and they're in a sense better, more ready for the workforce because they're used to working with other people and working in teams.
It's so true, and they have so much more information at their fingertips. I mean, when you and I were young, and if there was something we needed to know more about, I mean, you'd go to the school library and Encyclopedia Britannica or one of these others. But then the problem with that is you're reading dated information anyway. Today, I can be speaking to a group of young people, and I can be making statements. And half the time, they've got their devices out, and they're Googling to see if what I'm saying is true.
Yep.
And they will, at the same time I'm speaking, they will Google and they'll find past speeches that I've given and start asking me much more detailed questions than I ever could have done when I was their age. So that's the thing we don't want to forget is, yes, they are different, but they have access to so much more information, and they're so comfortable at getting that information that I believe the sky is the limit. And I believe this generation and these millennials, they're going to make a big difference in this world. We just have to make sure we're doing the things we can now to get them ready as soon as possible. Because, Mark, they're not going to be as patient as you and I. You know, how long it took you to make your career and become the president of the university. I talk to young people throughout the world, and they want to know how in 5 or 10 years, and they think that is a stretch.
Well, yeah, they want to be managing people by the end of their first year.
Oh, yes. So what we have to do, and I bet it's the same thing for you, is try to early identify those who have exceptional talent, and then give them those experiences, take them out of their comfort zone, and expose them to things they haven't seen. But do it in more of a rapid-fire progression, because what you want to make sure you have is the best of the best and not the best of the rest. And if you don't move these real bright people very quickly, they will go somewhere else. So you have to understand that.
Now, what we see is this generation is, in a sense, more fearless than earlier generations. They're willing to take on more risk, but they have a challenge that we were perhaps fortunate not to have, which is they have so many choices. They get paralyzed by having too many choices. I could do this, it's particularly the students who have been the highest achievers. You know, I could do this, 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 or this. You know, I can go to medical school. I can get an MBA. I could start my own company. What am I going to do? And you know, I like art. I like science. You know, and I've got all these opportunities, and that's actually a big challenge for them. So I think one of the important pieces is that they get a lot in our environment, in the educational environment, is a lot of experience in different areas, so they can really actually do. And so whether it's going to be internships, which we think are so vitally important for this generation, that a college experience without work experience. Now you got it by working for UPS loading trucks, you know, and we still have many, many students that are doing that. It's that experience that makes it so much easier for a person to get a start. And that first job, just like your job loading trucks, you know, just keep going back to that, because that is the UPS story, you know, that you hear so often, particularly here in Atlanta with UPS here. Yeah. But is you know, the education today, and within certainly we're working towards a much more experiential world. And providing them with the tools to go out and explore. And when I say tools, it's the soft tools for students, you know, get prepared for what is going to be expected of you in the workplace, but also the technological tools to go out and create, to innovate. It's an exciting time. But one of the other things we see in the university, and I'm sure this has to be a challenge for you, is because we do draw students from all over the world, and we do get different cultures. Whereas the American millennials are this sort of fearless group that are ready to dive in headlong. We find students coming from other parts of the world are not necessarily in that mindset. There's still education in much of the world is to regurgitate. And it's like, here are the facts, memorize the facts, and you have to be able to reproduce them for us. And so one of the things that we're constantly working on is what are those different dimensions of learning and intelligence, getting people to be able to take information, process it, and create new. And so there must be something in your global operations where, you know, whether you do it by design or it just sort of happens in how you identify and promote talent, is finding those individuals who are really willing to get outside their comfort zone. That's always what it comes down to, is taking the risk of not having to tell somebody what they expect, but actually tell them something that they didn't anticipate.
Yes, it really is. And you do see millennials that are, and one thing, you have to be careful when you classify all millennials the same, right? But there are some basic values and things that you see. And I see it differently in different parts of the world. You're very observant there. In China, I can tell you that just extreme confidence. Mm-hmm. Not to the point of arrogance, but I met with a group of Chinese millennials, and their polite message was, this next generation, this next 50 years, this is going to be our generation, you know? And that the U.S. has had many of their generations, but that this is going to be our generation. And they have that mindset because they have seen millions and millions of their people that have reached the middle classes, that are living a lifestyle that's much better than their parents ever did before. And they have all the confidence in the world. And it's these Chinese multinationals that are going to develop operations throughout the world. And it's just, if you compare that to when you and I were first going to China,
yeah, it's changed completely.
You didn't have that confidence at all, and people felt like they stayed in China, and their goal maybe would have been to work for a U.S. multinational in China. Now their goal is to work for, whether it's a Chinese multinational or a U.S. multinational, and to run things throughout the world, and they feel like they can do that, and that is a key. And I think the educational system has helped there. I think the fact that many of these bright students are going to schools throughout the world, including Georgia State. I don't know exactly how many international students you have, but I know it's a significant number. And so they get those experiences throughout the world. If we don't do the same for U.S. students, and give them those experiences, they could be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, one of the things we do run into visa laws all over the world, including here in China, but it'd be really cool. I look forward to the day when we can give students internship opportunities around the world, so that an American student can intern with the UPS, but in a China or in a Singapore or in India or Europe, Africa, South America, wherever, and because that's an opportunity to get that cross-cultural experience while learning your company at the same time. And when I first went to China, my daughter was in junior high school at the time, and so she's an internet generation child. She'd gotten on the internet. She said, Dad, you go to China, it's in the U.S. we say you're 1 in a million. That means you're really special. In China, that means there's another 1,000 like you. And so you think about we've had Steve Jobs, we've had Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos. Jack Ma's just the first of many to come in a country where being 1 in a million means there's 1,000 like you. And so there's going to be other Jack Ma's, there's going to be other innovations out there. It's exciting. It's also challenging for people that don't deal with change quickly. And so I'm sure that change is something that you have to get your workforce, the UPS workforce, more used to being able to move in a world more quickly. And so your initiatives for the future of the company seem to really be around that the world is changing and we're going to have to adapt, be much more nimble than we've been in the past.
And that applies to every company. When I meet with other CEOs, we're all saying the same thing, that we live in a world of continuous transformation, just the way. And status quo is your enemy in this pace that the world is changing. In fact, what I just told a group of our leaders is status quo is really status no to our future. And that we have to be able to move, and we have to move at a pace that's faster than the external world, or we will get behind our customers. And so status quo to status no, and then where I've got our team focused is status grow, which means we've got to look at what does it take to grow this business to adjust to the changes that we're doing. But I really believe that that same thing would apply to your students, that learning what they need to know today, 5 years from now can be different, and 5 years after that. So teaching them how to continue to expand is a lot more important than teaching them about today. Today is going to get dated very quickly.
No, all of higher education. I mean, if you think that the model is Oxford and Cambridge in the 1800s or the 1700s, you're basically going to be stuck in time and eventually become irrelevant. And that's in education. We have to be relevant. If we're not educating people so that they can go out and basically thrive in life, why would they show up at the university in the first place? So. We're constantly looking at future trends. We're looking at demographic changes. We're looking at globalization trends, looking at technology innovations, and generational issues. I mean, we've talked about millennials. Generation Z is coming next, and they're even more different.
That's right.
Generation Z, which are in high school right now, I've been told that 2/3 of them think they'll have their own, or 2/3 of them expect to have their own business. So I don't know who you're going to hire because they're all going to work for themselves.
That's right.
Now, the reality is probably going to be a little bit different, and actually quite a lot different for them. But we do see that even now with the students that we have, is that the appetite for wanting to start their own company is very high. There are barriers, meaning if you look at many of the successes, it helps to have a safety net under you so that if you fail, because most companies do fail, that you basically aren't out on the street and homeless. But starting your own company is something that this younger generation is really looking to. And my guess is we're seeing that in China too, that a lot of people want to be the next Jack Ma.
Yeah, I believe that. In fact, I had a focus meeting with a group of Chinese millennials, and they were all talking about they wanted to run their own business. But I think in some cases, it was due to concerns about working for large corporations, and then there's been downsizings and stuff like that. And then in others, I think it's a little bit of being naive, that thinking, well, if I'm my own boss, if I'm running my own business, that things will be easier, and there's nothing further from the truth, right? Because you run your own business, now all of a sudden you're the chief accountant, you're the chief legal officer, you're chief sales, and
you're employee number one.
That is right. So I think there's going to be a mixture. I do believe that with technology and e-commerce that there's going to be more and more small businesses that are going to start. And those small businesses can become large businesses someday, which will be hiring a lot of people. But there's a lot of potential out there. And I think we're going to see 10 years we can look back and we're going to be really amazed at the way that we've seen our people and businesses and even governments are going to have to continue adjusting, because this is a globalized world and there's going to be less and less artificial borders out there.
There's without question. Given you and I can walk into the airport, pull out a piece of plastic, and be anywhere in the world within 24 hours.
That's right.
It's that easy. But as I talk to young people and they tell me they want to be an entrepreneur, I ask them, I said, well, let's be more specific, because the word entrepreneur actually means something very specific that many of them don't think about when they think about starting their own business, which is your goal to have a business, or is your goal to grow a business? And it's a simple example I give is, do you want to open a restaurant, or do you want to have a chain of restaurants that employs thousands of people, whether it's across the country or around the world? And those are two different mindsets. It's one thing to be your own boss. It's another thing to grow something to be the size of a UPS.
That's right. In fact, UPS started with a young entrepreneur. And now he was one of those that was able to actually execute and lead the company. In fact, he was the CEO of our company for 55 years. So I'm not going to break his record.
Yeah, that doesn't happen much anymore.
I know. And but he set the groundwork and framework that we still use today. But it was that entrepreneurial spirit, but then the ability to take that and actually make it happen. Now, in many cases, these entrepreneurs are what I call serial entrepreneurs.
Right.
They can start businesses. They understand that running and maintaining them is not their specialty. So they will either hire someone or they will sell the companies, and then they'll start with
they're
the
different
next
skill
one and
sets.
start with the next one. And so you just have to know what your specialties are and what your abilities are.
Georgia State is a home of a Confucius Institute. We partner with Beijing Language and Culture University, and these Confucius Institutes provide an opportunity for students here in the U.S. When I say students, I broadly define it includes the workforce, not just Georgia State formal students, but around Chinese language and culture, because as you've said, you have to have this broader, deeper understanding of the world. And so when we launched our Confucius Institute, it was with an eye towards business, thinking about where do we sit in downtown Atlanta with corporate headquarters such as UPS literally right down the road from us, and to be able to provide that opportunity. And so, and I know you're very active in the World Affairs Council, chaired the World Affairs Council for us here in Atlanta. So as a company, how do you look at tapping into those assets in the community for the company, for your employees, particularly for your junior employees that are working their way up?
Right. And I just think it's part of what we're doing. For you to run a successful university, for me to run a successful company, we have to take our operations throughout the world, and we have to go to people, and we have to expand. And this cross-cultural expansion is just the world we live in today.
I think, our involvement with the World Affairs Council is probably obvious that we share the same values. You think about all the countries you're in. We have students from 114 nations this fall at Georgia State. We basically have that diversity that you spoke about. And that's one of the exciting things at Georgia State is to see a kid from rural Georgia, not much different than growing up in Mississippi, who then takes a Confucius Institute scholarship and spends a year in whether it's Shanghai, Beijing, Hangzhou, wherever, and then to talk to them when they come back, because it's so transformational to have those experiences. And one of the things that I've always encouraged for our undergraduate students is the simple act of getting a passport is life-changing.
Yes.
Do you remember when you got your first passport and what your first trip was?
I did with my passport, and it was through UPS because I'd never traveled outside. And the first trip, I think, was to Singapore. And I wasn't even sure whether Singapore was a city, a state, or a country. And
It's an airline.
I know. I just knew it was a long trip.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you that, that through this partnership you have with the Confucius Institute, being able to take kids at a young age and give them that kind of exposure, even if they don't work across the world at some point in time, you've given them an experience that they will never forget the rest of their life. And they're going to look at the world differently for the rest of their life.
I think one of the most powerful experiences a person can have is to get off a plane in another country by themselves, go through customs and immigration, and then find out that really isn't that hard. But it scares students to death when they've never done it. But to do it by yourself, to get off that plane, and even in China today when I travel, I mean, I have no problem landing, getting in a taxi cab, telling the taxi driver where I want to go, and people are like, how do you do that? It's like, well, you learn a little bit of basic language, but taxi cabs pretty much work the same way most places in the world. It's just not that complicated. So it is, the first time is life-changing and really empowering. And so it's great that UPS, in a sense, gave you that opportunity and helped you develop in that way. And so as you look to the future of the company and where you're going, do you see any major changes on the horizon, or are we pretty much in a steady growth phase, or do you see some cataclysmic or shaking the earth types of events coming for global trade and global business?
Right. Well, I see a few that are just trends that I think are just going to continue to accelerate. E-commerce, we've talked about it, but I mean, that's the way the world is going, and it creates such opportunities for small businesses anywhere in the world to reach the world. And so that affects our network. These innovative technologies that are just popping up every day.
Drone delivery of packages.
That is right. I mean, there's going to be more and more of that. And so that's going to create opportunities worldwide. And then emerging markets. I mean, and you look at China, I don't know that I'd still consider China emerging.
I'd say they're pretty well developed.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they're still growing, and in China by 2030, which is not far down the road, 17 of the world's top 50 cities will be in China.
Yep.
And so whether you're a student or you're interested in doing research or you're interested in going to work for some company with a global supply chain, you've got to realize that China is probably going to affect your future over the next 30 or 40 years. It's just going to be such a part of the world.
Yeah, no, I tell Americans, in the U.S. we consider a city with 1 million people a big city. In China, there's a couple dozen of them. Most Americans have never heard of. So you think about your business, with all the e-commerce that's going to be, there's just the opportunity seems to be, if not unlimited, a lot of room for growth left. But as you are in a business where there are others attempting to disrupt your business. And as you look to the new technologies and the innovations that UPS is going to do to sustain its future, do you look for new ideas coming out of places like China in terms of new technologies, new approaches to doing the business of logistics?
We absolutely do, because we're in 220 countries and territories. And while U.S. is our biggest market, and it will be for quite a while, we're going to be growing so much faster in these other areas. And the one thing that your viewers, if they can get from what I'm talking about today, is eliminate the phrase, if it will work in the U.S., if it'll work in New York, it'll work in Beijing. I mean, there is just nothing that ties that together at all, because
there's a lot of American companies found out that didn't work.
That is absolutely right. The U.S. way can work well in the U.S., but then you have to adapt to those cultures. And the biggest mistakes we made as a company early on is we'd go to a country and we would apply the UPS way, which at that time was the U.S. way.
Right.
And you would just make mistakes. But then when you talk to our local employees and learn the cultures, we would never have done those things that way.
So what about David Abney allowed you to be so adaptable? Because you did grow up in a time, in a place where there wasn't necessarily a lot of openness to other ways of thinking and doing things. So what about David Abney allowed you to grow in the way that, because you've obviously grown tremendously as an individual and as a leader. What do you think really helped you do that?
You know, I think there were several things. One is I got my education and my degree at a small university in Mississippi, but I feel like I got a much greater degree in cross-cultural experiences from UPS. And so being able to see things at an early age and experience, and even though I didn't feel like it at the time, but being pulled out from the South and transferred into New Jersey and say, here, and
have at it, young man.
And no one told me they were pulling me out of my comfort zone to see if I'd be able to handle other experiences and other people. That's absolutely what they were doing. Now, the first few weeks, you might as well have had me in some part of Asia. It was so different for me. But that's where you grow. And the other thing I would encourage, especially your students, would be step out of your comfort zone. That's how you learn.
So it's no wonder we get along so well, because I'm constantly telling students, the only way you're going to continue to grow is to put yourself in situations where you're not necessarily comfortable. Stretch yourself, take challenges, take opportunities to learn and do things you've never done before and you're not sure you can do.
That is so true. And the other thing, and I know you would believe this too, is especially some of your students that are coming from smaller areas, and for me, a lot of people can tell people with good intentions, well, that's not the things we can do, and you can't really do that, so you could not work in Asia or something, because we've always stayed in our little small town. So I encourage young people is, you can do what the heck you set your sights to, and don't listen to people, even if they have good intentions, telling you what you can't do, because it's amazing what we can do.
Well, you know, as I've taken on different leadership roles, at each time, you know, and unlike you, I haven't been with the same organization my whole career, but I go into a new organization, I sit down with my leadership team and say, okay, so I'm going to ask a lot of questions about, you know, what we do and how we do it and why we do it. And there's only one wrong answer. And that one wrong answer is because we've always done it this way. So at UPS, when you have a very long history and established culture, how do you resist against we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way? Is that something that you're intentional about within the company, or does it just seem to happen? Or because there's a risk to getting stuck in one way of doing things.
It certainly is, and most of our people spend their entire career with UPS, and so this year I've been focusing on moving forward fast, and that's our theme, and it's throughout the company. And I also talk about UPS Now, which we're very proud of. We've had this great 110-year history, and we can celebrate that. But UPS Next, which is much more important, because as the world changes and as our customers change, it's got to be UPS Next. And then we have to think even beyond that to UPS New, and that is, what are we going to have to do in 10 years that we maybe aren't even thinking about today? And I bet it's the same way with your university too.
Absolutely, absolutely. Constantly thinking about what's the future look like, because it's different than the current, and how are we going to adapt, change, what are we going to stop doing that we're doing now, and what might we do that we never thought 5 years ago would have even imagined we might do, or do it, whether it's doing it differently or entering new markets even.
That is so true.
So as you know, with your talent and your team, you know, you're a much more international company now than when you started back at Delta State.
That's right.
Do you think that the more diverse talent pool actually empowers the university to more quickly move into the future?
Oh, I think it really does. One of the mistakes that you can sometimes make is if you don't take advantage of that local talent. And so we pride ourselves that in most countries, the people that run those countries are people that are from there. But we don't leave them there for very long. As I said, and not only just bringing them to the U.S., but we may take someone that's got a key role in China and send them to London and have them work there for a while. And it's to stretch them, but it's also to help our people in London to learn more about Asia at the same time. And but the more diverse thinking and people from those different experiences that you can bring in, the more you're going to benefit.
I think you're going to be a more competitive company because you're going to have so many different perspectives to consider, and especially for a company that really does promote from within. It seems that the more multicultural, multinational workforce you can have, the more good ideas you're going to have on the table, more perspectives. Just think about a young person growing up in China today. Their experience with e-commerce is going to be so intense because just the way that things are developing there, that the employees there are going to have a perspective that will be quite different than your employees in other parts of the world, just because of what they've seen and done as young people, and they bring that into your company as new employees.
That is so true. And the mobile devices, that's what's just changed the world. Even when you and I, if we were into e-commerce a few years ago, is you'd go home to your computer, probably at the end of the day, and you'd enter some of these sites, and then you would order, and then if it came in the next week, you'd be fine with that.
Yep.
Today, people on their way to a coffee shop are shopping, and then they, of course, want instant gratification.
Well, and the coffee's ready when they get there.
That's absolutely right.
It's ordered and they get it on the way.
Yes, and so it's just a different world. And this young generation, especially the students that you're bringing in for the first time, it's just going to be a matter of a few years that e-commerce is just commerce, and that people don't think even twice about it. And so as companies and as universities, we have to learn to adjust to this mobile generation, and it will continue to be an even more mobile generation.
So if you meet a young David Abney today back in Mississippi who's loading trucks part-time while working their way through school, what piece of career advice would you give him about looking to his future at this point in time in history?
The first thing I'd do is say, boy, do you have a lot to learn. And I did, I admit that. And but there's just a few simple basics. In one, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, but continuous self-development. And because none of us, when we're 18 or 19, think about yourself, were ready to do the jobs and could have handled the experiences that we handle now. And so it's those who do not feel like, even when they get their college education, that they're finished learning, but it's just got to be continuous learning. And then it's got to be diligence. It's got to be people that will do their job to the best of their ability, regardless of who's watching. And not everyone will do that.
Would you encourage them these days as an undergraduate to get as much of a sense of the world as they could possibly, and have a sense of, because we are in a global economy, and certainly UPS competes in a very global world. I don't know that when you and I went to school we got a lot of that, but would you encourage that for young people today?
100%. And I know that at Georgia State you guys have done so much. I basically consider you a global university because of all the work you've done, especially your close relationship with China. Back when I was going to school, it was all U.S. focused. I learned very little. And whether it was from a language standpoint, but just basic geography of understanding the different countries in Asia and Africa. You kind of knew Europe, but not the others. And so I would encourage young people today to first learn all you can about what's going on in the world. The U.S. is an amazing country. Learn what you can in the world. But second is to make sure that you take advantage of the opportunities to learn different languages. You can say bilingual, but multilingual is even better. And when you go in Asia, as you do so often, or Europe, multilingual is very common. Here, try to find a lot of multilingual people in the U.S. It's just not as common, and it's something that as an educational system we need to improve.
And I would assume for UPS it's important to have a multilingual workforce because you are global.
It absolutely is. And it's kind of important what language people choose too. For me, I spent 2 years in my high school years taking Latin. I don't know why, but maybe there was a particular girl I wanted to sit next to, but I took Latin. My kids took Spanish and for a couple of years, and I think that helped them. I have 6 grandkids today, and my advice to all 6 of them will be to learn to speak Mandarin, because there's so much in the next 50 years that's going to happen in China, between China and the U.S. I just believe that's the language of choice at this particular time.
Well, Georgia State will be a resource for them if they're here in Atlanta with their Confucius Institute.
That's right.
That'd
So
be
we'll
a
keep
terrific
that in
opportunity.
mind.
So, as you hire talent in China into UPS, what advice would you give to a young Chinese David Abney who's also starting with the company, but in China, not in Mississippi?
That's right. You know, it would be fairly similar advice, be a little bit different, but the first thing would be to learn as much about the rest of the world too. And I would say most Chinese understand the rest of Asia, and but they may not know quite as much about the rest of the world. So getting exposed and understanding the different cultures there. Speaking English, if you're going to work for a multinational company, the better that you can speak English just gives you more opportunities. Something we do is kind of a reverse expat, Mark, is that we will actually bring Chinese people into the United States and put them in key roles here so they can learn more about our company. And then we send them back to China, and then they are even stronger leaders.
Well, David, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating to learn about your personal experience with UPS and rising now to CEO and chairman, and the important work that you've done in really positioning UPS globally, including your work in China. It's just been spectacular. And your partnership with Georgia State, I mean, as we too are really a globally oriented institution, has been so much that I'm very appreciative of. You've created opportunities for our students, and both while they're at Georgia State, the work that we do with China through our Confucius Institute and our partner institutions across the country, the opportunity to develop new talent and have some of that new talent go to work for UPS. So it's very deeply appreciative of all that you do for your company, for our city, for our region, and really for the world. So thank you so much.
The real focus of this program is to recognize 10 individuals who exemplify the mission of the Confucius Institute. And that mission is dedicated to the teaching of Mandarin, the development of additional cultural awareness about China.
We have 10 exemplary students representing the vast diversity of the students body of Confucius Institutes all over the country.
To all of the honorees tonight, congratulations. You really, really, really deserve it.
But it's not just your knowledge of the language and the culture, it's actually the special spirit that inspires you to do this. And these difficult challenges that you've overcome in order to keep this going really require a certain quality of person to do this.
If we in America are going to compete on the global platform, we need everybody in this room, and we need more than everybody in this room to be able to feel comfortable in a different culture, in a different context. There are not that many people who really feel comfortable in a Chinese context, and I hope that each one of you in this room knows how lucky you are to have a Confucius Institute as a bridge. People need to relate on a human basis, and when you feel comfortable human to human, people to people, you're going to be a huge success.
My mantra, my number one belief is that there is nothing better than engagement. That's the way I live. If you are engaged in a common mission with the people with whom you work throughout the world, no one can stop you.
We need everybody in this room. We need all of you to take your language and your cultural aptitude and your interest and to combine it with whatever other skill that you're doing. I don't care if it's accounting, I don't care if it's PR, I don't care if it's medicine. Put the two together and help the world connect.
They are extraordinary young people, and I'm very proud to introduce them to you tonight.
Americans should learn Chinese because America and China are so connected in economy and trade, and in our daily lives, China affects a lot of what we do.
Having a strong relationship between these two countries is critical, and to do so, we have to be able to have these exchanges, and not just amongst the major leaders. It doesn't just need to be the presidents of both nations meeting. It needs to be the everyday citizens learning more about each other.
The East and the West both have different values, and both of them can combine to create something even more powerful.
Both countries can benefit from each other, and China plays a large role in America's economy and culture, so it would help them fully, if they learn the language, it would help them with communicating further.
Americans should learn Chinese just so they're not sitting in their little corner of the world.
We could solve issues a lot better together by working together and learning how to communicate together as opposed to individually. So I think the sum of us together is way better than us individually.
Being involved in a Confucius classroom has really given me more of an understanding of not only a language, but a culture. And I've spent the past 6 or so years really immersing myself in Chinese, from the classroom to the field trips to the music to the people. And I want to major in international relations, and a lot of that is because of the experiences that I've had in my Confucius classroom.
I would just say, just jump right in and start learning, and you can do it, especially when you have things like the Confucius Institute behind you.
It's such a big world and such a diverse world, and there's so much that, at least for me, I don't even know what I don't know. And so by having educational cross-cultural experiences, I think it helps us broaden our horizons, it helps us deepen our understandings, and it helps us build connections with people.
Being able to visit China and speak to other middle schoolers entirely in Mandarin is something I never could have imagined a few years ago. It all happened because of my friends at the Confucius Institute at William and Mary College. I shared my experiences growing up in the U.S., and the Chinese students shared their experiences growing up in China. I asked them what they would like people in America to know about middle schoolers in China. Can you guess what all of the kids wanted us to know? Like kids everywhere, they all shouted out homework. They said that they have way too much homework and not enough time for social and fun activities. They seem to think that American kids just have fun all the time. This is not true, by the way.
So what I really want to do is raise my hand and raise a toast to everybody here, and to say thank you so much for getting it. Thank you so much for being part of this and understanding it, and to help us achieve what's going to be so important for the people that follow us.